Welcome everybody, my name is Michael and today we're discussing about Doordash, a huge update over the past week really, in terms of Doordash, Uber, Lyft, all these gig work apps. I am no longer doing them. Good riddance, because right now I first of all am going through bankruptcy and you can't, there's no point in making more money because you might throw yourself from a Chapter 7 to a Chapter 13. And right now I am working full time. And I'm working more than the average 40 hours because I'm not trying to do a 9 to 5. I'm perfectly happy with car sales. And I'm actually working less hours making, at least with the training program last month in car sales. I made right around where I was at the previous dealership, except working less hours. So I'm making more money. And this month we're on commission. We're going to make more money working less hours than the previous dealership. 100% selling a product I love. And in my opinion, it's a much more rewarding process than Uber, Lyft, Doordash, all these gig work apps. So my opinion always was, however, I kind of just held it deep down inside because, I needed money. I mean, you got to do what you got to do. When you need money, these apps can help big time. If you're working them part-time in addition to your full-time job, fantastic. However, if you're going full-time, that's fine as long as you do it temporary. Such as me, there was a point in time I did it full time and it sucked. It's not awesome at all because you are hurting your vehicle. There's depreciation, massive depreciation. You're increasing the chances of an accident happening. You're increasing the chances that something can happen to you. You might get hurt, or one of your passengers might get hurt if you're doing Uber or DoorDash or Lyft. If you're delivering food, maybe the chances of you getting hurt, yeah, there's always that, and maybe other people won't get hurt. But what happens if you get into a crash, and not only will that hurt your insurance, that might hurt other people around you, that might hurt also the value of your vehicle, so there's massive depreciation, even without an accident happening. And then you got to think about taxes. A lot of people don't. Taxes are a big problem, and many people will, come next year after their 1 year of putting thousands and thousands of miles on their car, where roughly it kind of works out to $1 per every mile. But of that, you gotta, after everything's said and done, take at least half of that away for taxes and depreciation and fuel and maintenance. I mean, every vehicle requires a lot of maintenance. I work at a dealership, and yeah, our service prices are insanely high, overpriced, but I see how much some of these services cost. And even for a normal vehicle, if you're driving a Volkswagen or Honda or Toyota or whatever, cars that don't really cost too much and for the most part are okay. Well, maybe not all Volkswagens, but cars that generally are pretty okay. The number one thing is eventually there is going to be that one big repair bill, and are you ready for that? In many cases, you're not going to be. So if you're working full time and this is an extra little part-time gig, great. For me, when I'm working at a dealership, obviously hours are a little bit more than your normal 9 to 5. So getting a second part-time job, maybe if I was delivering pizzas on Sunday or whatever, but a normal, secondary job after work on the work day week, the weekday days, that's not happening. So gig apps are perfect for that. And this is where the ethics and moral debates come in, because these applications know that millions of people are using them because they need money. First and foremost, they need money, and many people are doing it part-time, and they take advantage of you. They take advantage of you like crazy. These companies know that you depend upon them, especially if you're working full-time. Part-time, there's a lot of competition between the apps, but between the specific niche apps, for example, it's Uber versus Lyft, DoorDash versus, Uber Eats and Grubhub, and yeah, there's Instacart, but each one has its kind of niche. Well, one you do shopping, the other has districts, the other is all around, but since it doesn't have districts, and like Uber Eats, since it's all over, there's going to be less orders coming in. Each one has its pros and cons. The problem is these applications know through their data, through analytics, everything there is to know about their application, how to make more money off of you, how to make more money off of the clientele. These applications are overpriced for clients. I mean, I've used DoorDash and Uber, and even with the Dash passes and whatever, it's way too expensive. And it never really made sense. And one thing I always thought of was okay, even on the slower days, where with DoorDash recently, it sucks because there's tons of people. It's never available. You're never able to, yes, you have to schedule ahead, but there's plenty of shifts where you're not going to make a lot of money. And whether you've got a multi-app, but even multi-apping, it's not going great. And sometimes it was crazy. I did like the most I ever did was like 4 or 5 orders in an hour multi-apping, and that was a disaster because 2 were late and whatever. That was like the extreme limit. Usually 2 to 3 at a time, then you're all right. But with that, I mean, after everything is said and done, on your best days, best hours, whatever, maybe you make $25 on your best hours, but really you're working for like $15 an hour, if that, because again, the depreciation taxes, all that come into play. And I always thought, because I tried doing this type of work, gig work in Poland, there was an application called Volt, and they have their own version of like Uber. They have their own version of DoorDash and everything. And I worked for Volt, and it was such a different experience where I didn't mind it as much. They didn't, I don't know how they're like right now. Maybe like with every gig work app, at first it's great, then it sucks. But I remember it was a completely different experience. First of all, very comfy t-shirts. I still wore the t-shirts years after, super comfortable. They gave you gear. They asked you to come down to the corporate office. You had an hour of training with them, and you saw the people working at the actual office, like the HR people and whatever, and it was a really cool experience. And they were more selective, so kind of like a Grubhub style, I guess. And then once you got in, you scheduled yourself similar to DoorDash. You had your zone, but you got guaranteed pay. If you didn't make this and this amount, then you got guaranteed pay. In Poland, it was 20 PLN per hour. So that was pretty big. And now we're talking about guaranteed pay for DoorDash. So that's huge news, because this is like years after they should have introduced this. Is this going to be record-breaking, world-changing? No. But in some cases, it might help. It actually might. So ultimately, I do believe this is good news. Is it crazy this is going to change the game entirely? No. But there's a problem, because it's not that simple. See, if this was normal guaranteed hour, you're getting $15 an hour, 16, whatever the minimum wage is. For DoorDash, they're using an example of 14 divided by 7 for, an active hour of half hour. It's dependent on cities. Obviously, the more expensive cities like Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York City, Seattle, Los Angeles, pretty much any city in California, you are going to have guaranteed probably minimum wage, and that's that. And that's for, in theory, this would work great. This would work fantastic for those hours where it's really slow, nothing's really happening, for a day where it's like maybe, like at the dealership, it was a little slower right before and right after 4th of July. People have traveled, different states and whatever, and they're not car shopping. Same thing with maybe DoorDash, maybe they're traveling, whatever, they don't want to necessarily DoorDash. So on those days, you might work an 8-hour shift and barely make anything, and it would make sense to make that up, as long as it worked like Volt in Europe, at least back then, where it wasn't for the active hours, it was just for hours in general. You work 10 hours, you get paid 20 PLN per hour. I would make 200 PLN per day, even if I wouldn't hit the necessary, there was no necessary, you would have some hours that, great, you have 3 orders, everything's perfect, other hours, nothing. Like the later hours of the day, I forgot which hours I worked, but let's say I work from like 2 p.m. to 12, right? And during that time frame, the last couple hours, no one's really ordering. Maybe 1 or 2 orders, whatever. Maybe you reject a couple orders. And there's a certain limit, right, with rejections. But with DoorDash, it's 2 orders maximum rejected per active hour. Active hour means it might take you an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Active hours when you accept. So when you accept, and that's that. You got to accept these really bad paying low orders, and that's probably why this has been introduced. So in theory, this would be great. This would be fantastic. And I'm sure there's probably some situations, very, very rare situations, where this will be a good thing. But for the most part, it's just another way. It's really a bad thing, and most people shouldn't be using this, because you're going to be accepting orders and praying that tips will save you. In that time frame, you're probably going to make more money just by selectively rejecting. So in theory, for those people who are at the bottom, this is going to be a saver for them, because if you're accepting every order and literally losing money, well, this is probably for you. But for the average person who's selectively, like, me, I have, honestly, on Uber, DoorDash, everything like 10, 20, 30% acceptance rates and whatever, maybe even worse, because I don't care. I stopped caring at one point or another. You just pretty much pick up only the orders that are much better, higher paying. So with that, it's a much better experience, because you can selectively choose maybe 2 of 10 orders that come in, and those 2 will pay higher tips. They're going to better restaurants and whatever. But there's days where very few orders come in. Again, if this was a perfect world scenario, anytime a bird flies like directly over, I'm worried about it pooping. Then if it worked like Volt, this would be great. On the bad days, you at least have a guaranteed pay. On the better days, you make more. This is more like Uber guaranteed pay, but technically even worse. So with that said, just wanted to thank you guys for watching. If you're working DoorDash, Uber, whatever, full-time, worst case scenario, get a dealership job. And yeah, sales isn't for everybody, but you're going to make a lot more money. And there's going to be slow days where you're waiting for a client, but I'd rather wait in an office, air-conditioned, for a client that potentially could make me a couple $100 instead of burning my car into the ground. But I did learn a couple things, I guess. Interaction with clients. So thanks for watching. Have a good one. Have a good rest of your day, everybody. Thanks for watching. Take care.